Okay, let's just put this away. Okay, we're going to split the session into two. First thing we're going to talk about is the new role-based certifications, and then we will have got a few people come and join me for a question and answers. So if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask them. First things first. I guess actually first things first. My name is Christopher Lewis. I am a cloud management solutions engineer working at VMware. I have been part of the VMware Education SME program for about 3 years now, and I have written, apart from desktop and a little bit of networking, every exam from that period. So whether it be VCP, VCAP, design, deploy, VMC specialist, VCF specialist, vSphere on Tanzu, cloud management and automation, VCP, cloud operations, VCP, VCAP design, VCAP deploy. So essentially about 25 certs in the last 3 years. So I apologise if you've taken them and you don't like them or they're too difficult. Then the long questions are normally the ones I write. And they're balanced out by some shorter ones. But one of the things I wanted, or what we've done, and we've been working on in the last, I would say 6 months, is a role-based certification called the VMware Certified Cloud Infrastructure Administrator. And it's been a journey over the last 6 months. I spent 2 weeks in America developing this exam. So it's one of the first, since COVID, one of the first in-person workshops based in America in sort of June, July time. So that was in Florida, in Disneyland, hardship. And then in September in Atlanta as well. So I'm just going to go over a few of the benefits and why we're doing what we're doing and how you can take it. So essentially, when anybody asks me about exams or I talk to people about exams, there tends to be a few questions that get asked or that people ask themselves. Why do I need to be certified? How do I become certified? Where should I start? When should I start? Am I good enough? That one I've asked myself before I joined VMware quite a lot of the time around the VCAP level certifications. Am I good enough for VCAP? And the answer is you are. In fact, I find the VCAP exams easier than the VCPs. If you've got a VCP, you've done most of the hard work already. And then finally, how long will it take? There are various benefits for being certified. There's obviously that thing that I have is that I like to challenge myself. I like to learn a product and then challenge myself around how much do I actually know against other people. And it's the easiest way to benchmark yourself against other people is to take the same test. And it's not necessarily about, I've got 350, you've got 400. It's about, have I passed or failed? It doesn't matter. If you've got over 300, then you've probably been doing too much study. If you've got under 300, then you haven't done enough. But if you've got 400, you've been way studying too much. It's about, a part of that challenge, as I said, is about learning and improving those skills to yourself. So I started with data center virtualization, moved into cloud management, and then into network virtualization. I don't do desktops, but I only pushed myself enough in the network virtualization to where I was comfortable, because it wasn't really my thing. That doesn't mean it's not a thing for everybody else, but for me, networking it's always been that dark art that I've never quite understood. Makes you stand out, and especially on a CV or to your boss, as someone who wants to be acknowledged for the skills that they have, and that can be really important. And that recognition might also come in the form of reward. I know in previous companies I worked with, every time I got a VCAP, I got a bonus. So that drove the behaviour of doing VCAP. That was a services partner, and that did help them, but you did get a bonus. What you also have to remember, even from a VCAP perspective, and this slide is actually from last year, there were only 16,000 VCAPs in the world. and there are like 150,000 VCPs or something like that. There's a markedly more number. So as you go up the stack, you become an elite sort of skill set. And I think at the moment VCDX is less than 350, so there are only 350 people with the VCDX in the world. So as you go up, obviously that takes a lot of time. And then through all those skills, challenging, recognition, you grow. You grow as a person, you grow as a technologist. It's not, when I get asked about why I'm not a VCDX or why I actually don't need to do VCDX, it's because it's about the journey, not the end. And yes, I could do VCDX if I wanted. If I needed to, I could. I'm not saying I'd pass it, but I'd go through the journey. But at the moment, my role doesn't require it. So why would I do that? But again, not for everybody. Now, the existing certification path is a little bit complicated. Okay, so you tend to have these 4 levels. The VCTA, the operator level, the administrator level, which is the VCP, and you don't have to do the VCTA to get to the VCP, but you do have to do the VCP to do the VCAPs, and you have to have the VCAPs to do the VCDX. But it's very much product focused. You have to have a course in the VCP level. You don't have to have a course in the VCAP level. So there's a barrier to entry in terms of cost as well. So those courses aren't cheap. A few $1,000s a time. If you are lucky enough to go on one of those courses, my advice is to take the bull by the horns and take the exam afterwards, because that course is only valid for a particular level of course. Because if we go to ESX 9, for example, and you've got an ESX 7 course, that wouldn't be valid in the 9 certification. So take it and do it while you're there, because you spent 5 days deep into the technology, and all of the exams tend to be based on courses. Then you've probably got all the information you need to pass the exam. Now, it gets even more complicated because we have multiple tracks. So whether you're start here, data center virtualization, time and effort, skills and knowledge, as you go up and across, you can choose where your journey ends. But essentially, it's just this, and I haven't included security on this. There's a security track as well, but it's just really complicated. And when you look at, over time, the sort of amount of effort from a data center virtualization to get, and these are stylistic, not based on these sort of numbers, but when you look at what you would do from a cloud management and a data center virtualization, and the amount of time and effort it takes to get to where you want to be on that pillar is, only sort of added on from the certification. So again, you might start your career with no knowledge at all. You might do the VCTA when you've got a little bit of knowledge. You start using things, then you may decide to go VCP. You might go to a specialist badge. You might go to a VCAP. You might do design before deploy. It depends on where you are, whether you're doing architectural work or whether you're doing implementation work. I did the designs before the deploy because they were easier to do because of the work I was doing. And they weren't timed like they were with the deploys. But then you might jump ship from one track to another. So suddenly you start here, but you end up all the way over there. If I press enough buttons, And so I've done here, and come to here, and I came down here, and I stopped. I stopped actually in the network, but I've done the up to the CMA as well. So really, the journey is yours to do, but it takes an awful long time and an awful lot of effort. And that isn't, historically, it's great to do breadth by, I prefer to do breadth by doing depth in multiple technologies, but that isn't for everybody. And so sometimes we need to have a role or a certification that allows you to get where you need to go and then decide where you want to go afterwards. And that's what the role-based certification is all about. So, what is a VMware Cloud Infrastructure Administrator? So it's anybody, it's you, it's me, that has the skill set to do it. There's no specific requirement. I mean, you have to be able to deploy vSphere solutions, or VCF if we're being honest, and know something about one of our hyperscaler solutions. Not all of them, just one of them. You might get questions on AVS, you might get questions on VMC, you might get questions on GCVE. And if you don't know those three, or you know VMC but you don't know the other two, then just learn a little bit about those. It's all in the cloud. It's all in the cloud template, the blueprint. Because my brain's constructed to say I'm not allowed to use blueprint anymore. And the sort of roles that we're looking at, converting to this VMware Cloud Infrastructure Administrator. You could be a vSphere Administrator, you could be a junior one, you could be a senior one, even from an NSX perspective, because it's a combination of vSphere and NSX. That's what VMware Cloud really is, vSphere, vSAN, NSX. That's all it's based on. We're not talking about ARIA, we're not talking about cloud management, we're talking about infrastructure administration. So as I said, it's a solution-focused exam really across those solutions, VMware Cloud Foundation, and one or more of the following. But if you think about it, the exam will expect you to do these sort of sample daily tasks. And it's a multiple choice exam, it's not a lab-based exam. But if you can do things like creating a private cloud on SDDC, or creating a cluster, creating a virtual machine, configuring storage, configuring networks, whether that be NSX or vSphere. Those are the sort of tasks we'd expect a cloud administrator or a cloud infrastructure administrator to do across the piece. And it really, when I was in Florida in June, July, it really sort of hit home because there was a team of us there, and one of the SMEs sort of said, well, I've got this customer who spends millions of pounds on PSO every year. And rather than trying to fix the problem, they just phone PSO. But the boss doesn't want to do that anymore because they want to save the money that they're spending on PSO. But there's 20 people in the team. So how do I get them all up to the right level? And my colleague sort of said, well, everybody needs to be DCV certified, VCP as a minimum. And then split the team in half. Half of them could be network and half of them could be cloud management. Because then you'll have a good spectrum of skills. But when you think about it, sending 20 people on 2 courses and taking 3 exams each, or 2 exams each, let's say, it's quite a lot of time, quite a lot of money, quite a lot of effort. And it was just ridiculous, that amount of effort that was required. For someone who just wants to be able to use and administrate a VMware Cloud service, because they don't need to deploy it necessarily, because they're not using VCF. But the VMC certification or the AVS certification specialists weren't enough for them. So this is why we have the Cloud Infrastructure Administrator. And so we need to decide where you sit in terms of what do we think a Cloud Administrator looks like. I mean, we look at effort, but actually I think it sits somewhere in these orange marks here. So a little bit more than VCP, but not quite VCAP level of data center virtualization and network virtualization. But again, it's a journey. That's a long thing to have enough skills in. And it might be that you start with network virtualization. It's the same. You end up at the same place, right? But it depends on where you start. What if we could give you a journey that was purely the cloud administrator? So a course assigned and aligned to a certification that you could take, and the certification is based on the course. It gave you enough skills and enough experience to start your journey. I'm not saying it's going to be the end for a lot of people, but it gives people a start to the certification journey and a much quicker time to value than having to do a DCV, VCP or VCAP and then a network virtualization, VCP and VCAP, because you're not necessarily going to, as a cloud administrator, a cloud infrastructure administrator, you're not doing bare bones installation of NSX. That's either sort of done by VCF or that's done by VMware Cloud. You don't have to do the install, it's about the consumption and the configuration. But most of the install configure manage courses are about install and configuration, but you don't get a choice in a VMware Cloud infrastructure. It's designed for you, that's the whole point, it's consumption. So why do you need to do all those courses? And eventually, so this is where we are right now. Eventually, we're going to have this cloud infrastructure architect as well to give you that for some, because some people don't want to do administration. Some people want just to be able to do the design aspect of it. And it's slightly different and brings together, again, that sort of data center virtualization and the network virtualization at a design level from a VMware Cloud perspective. But that's not all. I mean, there's nothing stopping you going on afterwards. If you want to start here, and you start your career, you might want to. You're employed, maybe as an administrator of VMware Cloud, and actually you like the technology so much you want to go deeper. Nothing wrong with that at all. It's your journey to take however you want to take it. But there's no. The biggest benefit. Next slide. Would be that there is no course required. Okay. So you don't have to take a VMware course. You have to have equivalent knowledge. Now, you can take one of these courses if you want to. There is a VMware Cloud Infrastructure Administrator course that's due out next year. And we wrote that side by side. Shall I say that the course team were part of the SME group, and the SME group had input to what the course was. We didn't actually write it, but we reviewed it and agreed it, and so that they were 85 to 90% combined. And that's coming out next year. So, but again, there's no hard requirement for that course. You can just take the exam anytime you want, which I think is definitely a much sort of better way to do it. And the role-based certifications aren't about products. Obviously, they have to use the products, the solutions, but it's not about how many network interfaces are there, maximum number of network interfaces on a virtual machine. Don't care. Really don't care. Or how much memory, how many hosts can I have in a cluster? That's a design level question. I don't care. It's about what do I need to know to do my job across the products. It's not about maximums, minimums, user interface. It's about what can the products do together. So there is a minimum qualified candidate. So ideally, you can install and configure VCF, or have done that at least, or had experience in doing it to a certain level. There is no major install and configure questions. And then you can deploy an administrator, a VMware-based private cloud and a hyperscaler cloud. That's the main requirement. Now, you can take the understandings as far as you like. Basic networking understanding, but an in-depth knowledge of software-defined networking. So you sort of need to know what routing and switching is, but actually you just really need to know what it is in software-defined networking world. Don't really care if you're a CCNA or anything like that, because that's a level that you don't need to be. Because, funnily enough, the Cloud Infrastructure Administrator doesn't need to be it. You can choose to be it, but doesn't need to be. And that's the difference. You have choice. Tools for automating deployments, that's not automation. That is how do I automate VCF, not how do I automate workload deployment. Health and capacity monitoring without ARIA. There is no ARIA in this exam at all. It's all about using VCF and vSphere-based tools. How do I do this? Now, obviously, from a VCF perspective, you would typically have ARIA automation, ARIA operations, the ARIA suite. But this is an infrastructure administration, certification. Now, we have talked in Florida, we talked about a cloud management certification as well, and hopefully that will happen sometime next year. But from the infrastructure administration perspective, you don't need to know about ARIA. It's about how do you use VMware Cloud, how do you use VCF. As I say, and then workload migration strategies either with or without HCX, essentially. And I realised I forgot to update the next couple of slides. So they're all going to say, after key takeaway 1, they're all going to say key takeaway 2, because I forgot to update that. So key takeaway 1. So the traditional product certification tracks aren't changing. They're going to be there. We're not getting rid of them, as far as I'm aware, anytime soon. Because for the likes of service partners, deep technical people, that's the way they want to go, and that's the choice that they've made. But the new role-based certifications are becoming more and more prevalent within the industry, and this is why we're starting to do them as well. Because actually, you don't necessarily need to go to the depth that the product-based certification is to do your role. And you might want to, again, it comes down to choice. You might want to, but you don't have to. It's based on role-based admin tasks, so it's not about product or UI knowledge. It's, what do I need to use to do, backups with HCX and stuff like that. So the sort of thing that you should know as an administrator on what to do. It's targeted of knowledge level between a VCP and a VCAP. Arguably better than a VCP because there is no config maximums or how many hosts you need to fill a cluster or anything like that. So not necessarily easier to take, but more beneficial, I think, because even we try to weed out the config maximums, and hopefully that's improved over the last sort of few iterations of the exam. But anything that anybody would have to Google is not something you should be asking in an exam from a config maximum perspective. It's not relevant. There's no exam prerequisites. They're just recommendations. So if you feel you have the level of knowledge that the MQC has, go and take the exam. There's nothing stopping you. It's available now, but it's in beta. So that beta means that not only is it only $50, basically we're doing what was called a traditional beta exam. So we used to do them maybe vSphere 6, so over the last 2 years, what tends to happen is we create the exams, we write the exams, it's one set of SMEs write the exam, and then another set of SMEs, sometimes including the same SMEs, would then say, well, how many people do we think are going to get this right out of 100? So we have 10 people do that, and then we work out a cut score based on that. It's all done, some metrics and psychometrics, and I don't really understand it all, but essentially they come up with a cut score. And it's not always the same for every exam. So what we're doing with this exam is we're giving people access to the bank to take the questions. And then once we have enough people that have taken the exam, we'll work out the cut score based on how the items are doing. So if everybody gets one wrong, maybe that's not a good question for the bank. Or 50% of them get it right, 50% of them don't, then maybe that's a good question. So we'll work that out as we get it. So we need a defined number of people to take the exam before we can have anybody pass it. But it is because it is a beta exam, it is a lot cheaper than a normal VCP right now. And I don't know what the ongoing price is going to be. But yeah, so it's available now, available to use.
Just based on that, sorry, does that mean typically the beta exam will expect to see more questions in there than the final release then?
So originally yes, but now no. So originally the plan was to give you all 300 questions. 225 or something like that. With a 3 hour, it's like a 3.5 hour window to do it in, and then we decided just to give you one section of it. So you've only got half the questions, or about less than half, because we tend to work out how many questions we need.
75 questions.
Yeah. So we tend to work out how many questions we need, and then we have how many forms we have, so how many different types of exams we have, and then we have extras in case the items don't form very well. So you'll see basically one of the exams as it would go, but if you took it twice, you wouldn't see the same exam.
And then also with some of the exams, sometimes you would get a question that's just out there to test the question itself. You would even count for a score.
Yeah.
Those questions might have been in your exams as well.
Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes we do things that don't affect your scores, but we're just trying to see how that type of item or that sort of technology is working. So if lots of people get it right, maybe we'll include that sort of type of item, like drag and drops or whatever, or maybe it's too easy. Or if there's 70% people getting it right, then maybe actually that's not a bad way of doing it. And so do lots of things in the background, which your eyes get opened up to.
Do you have different weightings for the question? No. And sort of say, no.
So in a multiple choice question, let's move on to actually. I'll answer the question, but let's move on to we'll answer it under this if that's okay. So the SME panel. So I put a call out. I had 2 people answer. So I have Ruta from Controller and Michael Poor from VMware. So we'll answer any questions you have. To answer your particular question, in a VCP or a multiple choice question, each question is worth the same amount. If it's a choose 3, it's the same amount as a choose 1. In a lab-based exam, so like the deploy exam, if you're asked to do 3 things, each one of those things will be worth the same. But if you get 2 out of 3, you'll get 2 out of 3 points. In a VCP, if you're asked to choose 3 out of 6 and you choose 2, or you choose 2 right and 1 wrong, you will get no points. So it is worth considering. When you're doing the deploy exams, it becomes a time management issue. And actually, it's better to, because the exams the items tend to be isolated and not interact with anything else, typically, you're better off to do as much of the question as you can and then move on to the next one if you can't do the last one. Or if the last bit's going to take a long time, then just ignore it and move on. Because it comes about time management in those exams. Question?
So with the role-based certification, is that going to become a prereq for, say, VCPs? No. Different parts?
No. So there's no, I don't, the honest answer is I don't know. When we talked about it in Florida, no, they're completely separate tracks.
So, sorry, I don't mean a prereq as in a requirement, but a optional track.
So it'll be a separate track.
Yeah, but to be that they would satisfy the course requirement.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
No.
So completely separate certification track.
Yeah.
We want to split out these role-based certifications from the product-based certifications. Now, they might change, but the knowledge I have is that product certifications aren't going away. They're there for people like partners of Extra and stuff like that who want to get in-depth in that technology because customers want to rely on the fact that they understand the technologies from top to bottom. But then what you want is a retained layer of people that when our service partners walk away, have enough knowledge to run the platform. And that's where the role-based certifications come in.
Thank you.
So if you already have a TCP VMC specialist certification, is there a course that you can take to move across to one of these role-based?
So not at the moment. And honestly, I don't know. We talked about how we would grandfather these certifications into, because if you've got a VCP NSX, a VCP DCV, and the VMC specialist exam, then you've got all the knowledge that on one side you could say, well, if you've got all the knowledge, just take the exam. On the other side is that you've got the knowledge, why should you take the exam? Right? Because you've demonstrated that knowledge through the certifications you've already got. So at the moment, it's so new, I don't know. It's the honest answer. It may be that they grandfather it and say, well, if you've got those certifications, then yeah. But I honestly don't know if that's going to happen. Any other questions? Oh, go on.
Yeah. So I did the VCP cloud
Yep.
exam earlier this year.
Yep.
And got that certification. I looked through this exam guide, and it was very similar in terms of the content. Not exactly like for like, but it seemed very similar in terms of what was expected and that sort of thing. So just wondering, how do they? Are they just going to be retained as 2 separate certifications?
They are going to be retained as 2 separate certifications. It may be that the VMC cloud goes away, but again, that's not. I haven't been told that. But if you've got again the VMC cloud or you've got the VMC specialist, those are VMware cloud maybe not, but the VMware specialist badges and DCV, that again deep product knowledge. VMware Cloud exam, the VCP, I wrote that one as well, is a broad exam, doesn't go too deep. But is very much doesn't cover, if I remember correctly, it might cover, I don't think it covers VCF, does it? The VMC. So whereas this one will cover VCF as well. So it's almost a combination of the VCF specialist, the VMware Cloud specialist, DCV, NV, and VMC specialist, and maybe the AVS specialist as well. But not to that level, because again, the specialist badges tend to go to a much lower level of detail, and most administrators don't need that level. They might want it, but from an employee perspective, employer perspective, you want to almost certify they've got a certain level of knowledge and they're not going to break anything, rather than having that deep level of certification. And that, from an employee perspective, I'd love to have that deep level of certification, but from an employer perspective, maybe they don't need it. Is the honest answer. So yeah, from a and when we did the blueprint creation, I was very much, I don't want to lift and shift necessarily from the exams we already have, but we need to make sure that the information is covered, which is why it looks similar, because if you're talking about a VMware Cloud Infrastructure Administrator, then you're talking about VMC, AWS, AVS, GCVE, which is what the VMC Cloud, or the VCP Cloud covers as well. So, but if you've taken your VCP Cloud this year, you'll be fine. Okay. Next year, remember to take a course, so you update it. There's a free piece of advice. If you have a 2022 certification and you have access to on-demand training, then you can take a course to upgrade it before the end of the year. Was there another question?
Yeah, so 2 years ago I did a VCB on 7, this year did the VCB on 8, and I think you mentioned it previously that they're getting more difficult in terms of they're going from a knowledge factor of maximums, let's say, to a scenario-based question strategy. Is that going to reflect across all various certification stacks? In the sense of, because NV hasn't updated in a while as well.
Yeah, so if it doesn't, it should.
Yeah, we've discussed it with DTF, for example, as well. We haven't done it yet. Also depends on who runs the program for that direction. It does happen, but there's also talks about lowering the standard for VCP, but making the deploy and design more important.
Yeah. So we use something called Bloom's taxonomy when we create exams. So there's 6 levels: remember, understand, analyze, apply, create, and ideate, or something like that. And so the VCTA level would be a remember and understand. I've read the information, I understand it, and I can regurgitate it on demand. And to a certain extent, some of those will get into the VCP. What we try to do is target the VCP and the VCAP as I've read the information, I understand it, I can take a scenario, analyze it, and apply it. That's where you get the scenario-based questions. So I understand that a virtual machine can only have 10 interfaces, but that's not what you're asking. You're asking a scenario, and I have to know the fact that a virtual machine can only have 10 interfaces and apply it to that scenario. Because the answer is not 10, it's something else. But I need to know that bit of information to be able to answer the question.
Yeah.
And that's a much actually easier exam to take, in my view.
And that's an improvement that has been applied over the years, because when I started my exams, like VI3 or something, you had all those, how many network cards you could have, and that amount of storage, and that, and if
definitely.
someone tries to put that kind of question, no!
Yeah, and we get to veto the questions, right? So there's a bunch of SMEs that write them, and then we review them and we veto them if we don't like them.
So those discussions,
yeah.
That's actually where we learn the most.
Yeah.
They can get quite heated.
Yeah.
Years ago it was Anna Junis and Brian Graf were project managers discussing for like 25 minutes on one question, and the rest was just learning.
Yeah.
Sucking up all the information.
So yeah, I mean it definitely is changing, and I think for the better. because again, and they're not moving to role-based certifications, but they should definitely move away from which button in the UI do you press to do this?
Remembering command lines.
Because in the world of SaaS, that changes monthly. You know, I do an experience day, and every month I have to go through all the labs to make sure that the buttons are still called the same thing, because we might have changed it.
I think as you said, if you can Google it, it's generally you can.
Yeah.
Google
It doesn't test your knowledge; it just tests the fact that you can Google something.
Yeah.
You know, because if I need to look up ports.vmware.com to look at a port, I'll look up ports.vmware.com.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being able to apply that knowledge in those scenarios.
Go on, Chris. Yeah.
Actually, on related to that, the Microsoft role-based exams have recently added a feature where you can consult Microsoft Learn websites when you're taking the exam. You don't get open internet access, but you can access certain parts of the Learn website. So things like looking up a maximum.
Yeah.
So
VMware used to have that.
On the deploy exams,
so you're answering a question,
yeah.
and as part of that question, you know you need to look up what's the maximum number of network cards.
Yeah, but the risk is looking up takes time.
Takes time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there is that.
So
And they do bring that in.
in the CCIE, they gave you the documentation manual. They gave you the entire Cisco documentation manual. But if you try to take a CCIE by just relying on documentation manual,
you will fail.
You'll fail. Yes.
I mean, this thing, they're not. My understanding of that is they're not doing it in the. You need to rely on this. That's just there. So if you.
Yeah, and that's it was the same with
That's part of the information.
yeah, it was the same with the deploy exam, and I can remember I think the DCV one where you had to remember a PowerShell command for some unknown reason. Yeah. And you would be like, yeah, I can't remember that. I'm just gonna look it up. But it would be one of the last questions I did because actually it doesn't matter.
Just for fun, every DTM VCP level exam I've tried to get in Horizon API thing, like get vetoed all the time. So.
Yeah. So yeah.
PowerShell questions are always good though, because if they're multiple choice, 2 of the 4 were valid
Yeah, but-
PowerShell.
Yeah, but why would you need to know that level of PowerShell? In my view, why do you need to know that level of PowerShell? That's what tab is for. Yeah. Because
High development
yeah.
websites specifically for
So you've got an AI
It's
that fills
ridiculous that
everything
you
now.
Yeah.
even I didn't remember.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Is there anybody here who does not have VCP or something like that?
I've got valuable.
So if you are Cisco certified, you can skip the course requirement. If you can prove you're Cisco certified,
For the NV.
for the you can skip the course
Yeah,
requirement
I
for
think
the
that was,
VXM.
that was for the networking virtualization.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you then want, then you can still sidestep to DCV and all of them.
Now, I have lots of engineers that have got VMware certification, so they spend trying to explain to other senior level management colleagues how much time and effort they spend on these certifications.
Well, if they've got up-to-date ones, then it's just a course.
Yeah.
And that's so much easier. I mean, last week, I got 14 badges in a week. 14 digital badges just by taking
Now,
on,
asking yourself, what does he do the rest of the day?
taking on demand. Well, no, this was in my own time, just taking on demand courses.
Yesterday's updating LinkedIn.
You just need to press next every now and then.
Yeah.
So.
Because you've proven that you know the technology. You just need to get it up to date. And testing you again on very similar questions, but having a 7 or an 8 rather than a 7 doesn't prove anything. Because if you've invested time into taking that certification, and you're investing time to go and do the on-demand training,
So
then
just to fill in some of my knowledge, then, if you've got VCP already,
Yep.
and you want to refresh it, do you get access to that refresh course automatically?
No.
Or do you have to pay?
Still have to pay.
you have to pay.
Because I know you can pay for an online pass, which gives you access to almost everything.
Yeah.
That's
what you would do. You'd have like a enterprise learning subscription, because essentially, if we take certifications,
They're quite tricky as well, aren't
yeah, those are not cheap either. And you have to buy it for
But they can-
5 people or 3
Yeah.
or something like that.
but it's 5 concurrent, isn't it? It's not named. So, for example, the deploy exam, right? This is a $600 exam. Okay, if you take it once, and you've taken it this year, all I have to do is take an on-demand training course to get it to the next level.
Yeah.
Same with the VCP.
We are finding though that some of the vendors, some of the training partners are selling the training courses significantly cheaper than the on-demand courses.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, to be honest,
Really cheap.
if I had the time, I would always prefer an in-person course.
Okay.
But this, I did the on-demand courses outside my day job, and to be fair, most of it was on ×2, and I listened to it as I was working and doing other stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I used to previously work at Cisco, and we used to get all the training courses managed through.
Yeah, well, that's what we did from a VMware perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what VMware used to get.
yeah. And to an extent, partners as well.
Not that easily.
Well,
It has to be part, at least when I was still working for a partner, it had to be part of Ignite program or some of those programs that you had to go to a certain level, and then you could, with some effort, you could get some training for free.
Does VMUG Advantage give you a discount on that?
you get certification advantage. You get certification discounts. Yeah. I think it's like 10%, maybe 15%. No, the exam certifications. So this is. There was a Black Friday deal. I don't know why we're doing the Black Friday deal, but
You can buy them individually, or you can buy them part of the pack. So you can buy I think it's a training pass, aren't you? You can buy the training pass that you actually.
Yeah, it's on the other side. It's not on this part. It is, and you have the.
Cloud administrator. Where is it? So yeah, you can. It's currently $50. No certification requirements.
Thank you.
No certification requirements. Beta. You won't get the result for a few weeks, maybe months, depending on how.
Only after the exam goes live.
Yeah. So it'll be after the exam goes live. So we need to make sure that we have enough people taking it. So going into it, I mean, at VMware Explore, they was giving you a VCP voucher for taking the beta exam. So you'd pay $50, you'd get a $200 VCP voucher. But I don't think that's on anymore. But yeah, you won't get the answer straight. You won't get results straight away because we need to do
98 questions. So
Yeah.
it's about just an half of it.
Yeah.
So,
You know what's on scale, you would get results in terms of, like,
Depends. If everybody in this room takes it, it'll be a lot quicker. So I think we have to hit 50 people.
okay, so
So I don't know where we are. We were about 20 odd when we were at Explore. It got launched on the Monday of Explore. And by the end of Explore, I think 20 people had taken it. So it's but we haven't been really doing any advertising. So it was, if you didn't know about it and you didn't go to one of the only session that was run on it, then you wouldn't know that there was a B2 exam going on that you could take for $50 and get a free VCP. Yeah. So yeah, but yeah. So all recommended prereqs, no hard requirements, and that might change. It might change once it's gone live, but I don't think it will. We talked about it extensively. Any other questions?
so you have a slide that showed the architect one.
We had coming out of Florida, we had 4 potential exams: Cloud Infrastructure Administrator, Cloud Infrastructure Architect, Cloud Management. In fact, maybe 5. Cloud Management for VMware Cloud, Cloud Management for Native Public Cloud, and then a Cloud Management Architect, role-based. But we're starting with the infrastructure ones, and I can't guarantee we'll ever get to the other ones, because what we talked about in Florida may never come into fruition. From an SME point of view, we've sort of said, well, this is what we think we should do. Whether or not that happens is now down to our Broadcom colleagues. So
cloud infrastructure architect.
So so we were meant to develop that the week before Explore in Barcelona, but it got pulled because of the acquisition. But only because of the timings, not because we don't want to do it. It was a bit too close to Explore and the acquisition to to get it in time. So that's planned for the new year, the writing of that. And what will happen is hopefully I'll get to go again, and we'll go to somewhere in America and spend 5 days in a room writing the exam. Whereas previously, over the last 2 years, we've done it remotely, and it takes weeks to do that because you have 20 items, 30 items to write each, and you get given 3 or 4 weeks to do that. But the process is so long, but we wanted to shorten that. So you get everybody in a room, and you don't leave on Friday until it's done.
Arguing over Zoom is so much more lengthy than
Yeah.
arguing.
I can't get up and walk out in protest on Zoom.
Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Share it.
But yeah. So that's the plan. The plan is to do, assuming that everything carries on, is that, in fact, when we were looking at having the administrator exam in the first week of September, and then the other one at the end of, or maybe the first week of October, I think it was. And so, and then they shuffled around, and then it was too late to do it before Explore. So, yeah. But the plan is definitely to do it. Any other questions? Because we have time up, I think. Actually, it's time for the keynote. Thank you very much for your time.